This is a Marantz 1060 amplifier, early to mid-70s vintage. I'm not sure the exact year of production, somewhere between 1971 and 74 I think. But I got this off eBay in non-working condition. It's pretty beat up, scratched and dirty, and doesn't work. In fact, I paid a little more than I would have liked, especially considering that it doesn't work, but I like a challenge, and these are one of my favorite amplifiers to work on as well as listen to. In fact, I've got a 1030 on my computer upstairs that is my daily use amplifier. I use almost exclusively with headphones, and this would be a nice upgrade from that once I get it done. But this thing's definitely seen better days. It's very dirty. The feet are broken, and they told me that one channel wasn't working, so I'm going to take a look and see what's going on inside. Okay, everything's hooked up. Normally I don't recommend plugging in something like this that hasn't been properly serviced, but I know it got plugged in by the seller before I bought it, so the harm has already been done. Plus, if something blows up, it's more entertaining for the video, right? But let's see what this thing does. Yeah, left channel's dead. Channel's still got some punch though, even with them old caps. I can't wait to rebuild this thing. Well, I know the filter cap's still good. The doggone thing keeps playing forever when I turn it off. But anyway, I've switched around the preamp jumper cables and determined that it is the power amp that's not working. So I know the preamp has at least got 2 good channels. So, first thing I'm going to do is remove this power amp module and thoroughly clean the circuit board, replace the caps, and start checking the transistors. Yeah, somebody's definitely been in here before. The solder job on this output module is absolutely horrendous. Big, giant, crusty solder joints on everything. And spliced up, nasty looking wires. I'm definitely going to have to replace a few of the pieces of wire in here. Even on the input terminals at the top of this board, those really nasty solder joints. Wow. Here's the output module. It's definitely been worked on. One channel has 2SC 1402s, which are not factory, and the other side still has its original 2SC 897s. I'm going to be changing all 4 of those anyways. But one thing I did notice when I was removing all the wires, some of these terminals, the solder is completely broken on the other side, so that certainly wasn't helping things. And whoever was working on this before had left gobs and gobs of leftover wire strands on the posts every time they reattached everything, so I got to finish cleaning those off, and I want to get this board off of here and start working on it. Got the output module all disassembled. Heatsink needs a good cleaning. It's pretty messy. It had gobs of grease on it. The funny thing was, there was no thermal grease on the factory transistors, and these little black things are very small insulators that went around the 2 pins on the bottom of the transistors to insulate from going through the holes in the heatsink. And I dropped one of those. It's never going to be found again. Have to make a new one out of a piece of shrink tubing or something. But just out of curiosity, I'm going to test these transistors and see what I get here. That one's good. Try the next one. All the transistors were actually good, which reinforces my theory that it may just be broken solder joints and bad caps. I've also removed the bias diodes because these are very fragile and the leads tend to break off right at the body. So I didn't want those getting pushed around while I was cleaning this board. But I decided to test one, and let's see here. It has a forward voltage drop of 1.35 volts. I think there's actually 3 diodes in that package. And I hear they're kind of hard to find actually, so better protect them. I've decided that since the solder is so bad on these transistor leads, I'm going to remove those as well, and maybe the wires will still be long enough to reuse, but if not, I'll just put new wire in. But I've removed all the old parts, at least all the caps that I need to change, and I will test these transistors in a little bit. But first I want to clean this board because it's nasty. In fact, a couple of these caps, these 22 microfarad ones, were bulging and leaking. I'm also going to be changing these crusty old potentiometers so I can actually set the clipping adjustment and the bias very precisely. I've got the heatsink and output board cleaned and ready to start putting the new components on. I also had to replace all the screws because some were missing and the rest had messed up threads. But there was no problem there because the threads on these are actually the same thing as what's used on a computer CD-ROM or floppy drive. So I had a drawer full of those and just put all new ones in. And I've even cleaned the sockets. Hopefully they're still in good enough shape to reuse. A lot of times they'll get worn out and they will lose their tension and won't grip the pins tight enough. But these might be okay. Definitely got to replace the wires though. Continuing the work on this output module, several bad transistors on here, as well as an open emitter resistor. Apparently whoever changed those output transistors before didn't do any work to this, and that's why that channel still was dead, because those transistors were all factory. There was no evidence of anything being worked on at all. And the only ones that were still good were this one here, this one, and the 2SC945 up here. But I'm going to change all the transistors on this board actually so that everything is new and perfectly symmetrical and matched. I don't want any mismatched parts and uneven gain and things like that. So I've also installed new multi-term potentiometers for setting the clipping points and the bias. It's a lot better to use these instead of the single turn super touchy ones that were on there before. So I'm probably gonna have to order some more parts because I don't think I have all this stuff in stock. Kind of bums me out because I really wanted to put this back together tonight and try it out. Well, it's starting to come together slowly. I've got all the output transistors mounted, and these are all MJ21194G. I didn't gain match them because it costs too much for me to just buy a whole bunch of them for matching, but they'll be okay. That's what the adjustments on the board are for. I'm using silicone insulator pads because the mica insulators were in bad shape and I didn't have any more of those, but these will be okay. It's not like I'm driving it at full power 24/7 or anything. Plus these transistors are quite a bit heavier than the originals. And another reason I mounted these was so that I could put new wires on these sockets without having to hold on to them or clamp them down. It's just easier to work with it this way. And for those little insulators on the transistor pins, I just used a very short piece of insulation from a black wire, some scrap black wire that I had laying around, and it was a perfect replacement. So that went together real nice. And for the board, I'm using 2N5416 and 2N3440 to replace these, and 2N3440 up here. I don't know how good it's going to compare to the original, which is a 2SC875D, but I got to make do with that for now. In fact, I'm probably going to leave the other channel the way it was, just so I can do a side-by-side comparison. It's not an absolutely huge job to take this back apart and you know, change these parts at a later time if need be. But I also put new 2SC 945s, or I think they're KSC 945 or something like that, up here. So those are brand new, and those are gain matched. So I think I can put this back together as soon as I get new wires installed on these that are actually long enough to work with. But I'm really anxious to try it out. And I think I'm going to call it a night because it's probably 3 or 4 in the morning and I am just like a zombie, so I don't want to work too tired. I'm going to end up screwing something up. I decided to take this apart some more and start cleaning everything while I'm waiting for the rest of the parts to arrive for the output module. And I've installed the new feed on the bottom so it actually sits level. It's a little easier to work with that way. I noticed that the screw heads are stripped out pretty bad on the power transformer, so somebody has tried to take that out at some point in time. I'm not sure why. I did a quick voltage check and it appears to be working, so that's all good. I'm probably going to strip this thing down quite a bit actually, maybe take it down to the frame even, and clean it up real nice, you know, inside and out, every little piece, because I want this to be really nice. It's going to be something I want to keep for a long time as my daily use system, and I think it'd be fun to kind of do an all-out restoration on this, assuming I have the time and resources to do so. It's always nice to have an ambition for it anyway. Check this out. I have a Marantz 1060 jigsaw puzzle. We have a power supply over here, complete with the rectifier board. We have a front panel with some switches and controls, still connected to a phono preamp. A back panel with all its connectors. Preamp, tone controls, a pile of screws, 3 large caps, and some other hardware. I just got a couple things to remove from this main plate and I can have this thing redone. Wasn't so bad. Now we're talking. Frame all freshly powder coated and ready to go. I just got to start putting all the stuff back on. And then I can get on to the fun part of fixing all the circuit boards. Well, it's starting to look more like a Marantz 1060 and less like a pile of parts. Most of the stuff is back in. I'm just going to hook up a few wires and do a little more cleaning on the boards. There's some residue on there I got to take care of, which I will do when I do the recap. But most of the dirt's gone. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. And I meant to send the cover for the transformer out to be powder coated at the same time, but I forgot, so I'm going to have to take that off and paint it. But that's no big deal. It's just one little piece of metal. Working on the output module some more. I've got 4 brand new transistor sockets installed. More heavy duty than the originals, and this is one of the lugs broke off one of the original sockets while I was trying to change the wires, and I just said forget it and got all new sockets. And also put new wires on. Actually, they're recycled wires from old scraps electronics, so that didn't cost me anything extra. Had to replace the insulators, of course, because those are one-time use, and since I had them mounted once already, they were no good to use a second time. But hopefully they're mounted for the final time now. The bias diodes and output transistors are wired back up. All I gotta do now is connect power and speakers and start testing this thing. Holy crap, it lives! I haven't even fully tweaked it yet and just have it temporarily wired in. And still running the original caps on the preamp and everything, and it still rocks. In fact, that's with the dummy load running in parallel with the speakers right now. Turn that off. this thing sounds good for having the original preamp caps in it still. Friggin' sweet. Still got the factory components on the right channel other than the emitter resistors. And for those germanium diodes down there, what they call the clipping diodes, I've used BAT41 to replace those. I'm probably going to put all the same stuff on the other channel so that they match. But I've got to let it warm up for a while, make sure everything is stable, but man, it sounds good even so far. Let me see what else I can find to try out. Variac hooked up. Oh, and get this. I was getting ready to put the AC fuse back in the back before I powered it up, and somebody had put a 20 amp fuse in place of the 2.5 amp. Crazy. I really need to stop playing with this thing and finish the work I need to do to it, but I'm having too much fun listening to it even with all the stuff not finished. Still got to recap all the boards and put everything back together and replace the rest of the parts on this so both channels match. But too busy playing with it right now. Well, this project's finally coming to a close. I've got the faceplate and knobs back on. They cleaned up quite a bit, but they're never going to be perfect because of the scratches and stuff. Sometime down the road I'll replace them, and it's a real easy job. Just these 4 screws and pull the knobs off. I can do that while it's installed on my computer desk even. But for right now, I'm not worried about it. It looks pretty good. And the inside also turned out half decent. Kind of wishing I would have coated some of the other brackets and things in here, but it still looks much nicer. And the transformer's got a couple coats of black lacquer on the top cover, and it was very scratched up and just really looked bad before. And the transformer was also not mounted properly. It was loose inside here, and somebody had really messed up the mounting hardware, so I took care of that, got that all back in there properly. And a couple notes on adjusting the amp. I found that when this thing is really cold, like probably between 45 and 55 degrees, when it sits down here overnight, the heatsink is so cold that I can't even get the proper bias voltage. It's just too darn low. And I max out the potentiometers trying to bring it up, but at normal room temperature it had no problem setting it to 7.5 millivolts per channel where it needs to be. And for setting the centering voltage for symmetrical clipping, using these 2 inner potentiometers here, I found the quickest way to rough that in was to find the supply voltage going into the amp, which was about 70.7 volts, and set the DC voltage at the input side of each speaker cap to exactly half that. And that got me right about where I needed to be. In fact, I didn't even bother tweaking any further because it was just so close to where it needed to be. And in fact, I've had it hooked up to my dummy load here and my meter. Turn this on here and bring the volume up slow. On the scope here, you can see that the clipping is pretty much even. I've got a bit of noise at the top where it's hitting the supply rail and making it jitter a bit, but it looks very good. And in fact, I've got a clean 18 volts per channel, which using Ohm's law, that came out to 40 watts per channel RMS into 8 ohms. It's not bad for a 30 watt per channel rating on this. It's doing very well, and it's got a bit of headroom. I was a little bummed about the heatsink being broken on this driver transistor down here as I was putting things back together, but I found that these ones up here actually run warmer, and they didn't even have heat sinks on them from the factory, so I think it'll be just fine. Maybe someday I'll get another heat sink for it, but no big deal on that either. I'm back. All the plugs are cleaned up with deoxit, and had to make some new jumpers because the original ones were missing. So got that out of the way, and everything turned out pretty sweet. I just got to put the covers back on and take this thing upstairs and give it a real test on my good speakers. And over time I'll double check to make sure the bias isn't drifting or anything strange like that, but I think everything's going to be fine. Yeah, buddy, got the cover on. I'm just glad this thing's back in one piece. Anyway, I think I'm going to take this thing upstairs and give it a real test. Well, I'm up here jamming out in my bedroom, and so far no problems. Been playing for a good couple hours now. Stand back away from the desk for a change, and see how the room acoustics change on the camera. Well, I'm going to see how this video turned out, and I think it's case closed on this one. Been working fine.